That item that we are here to talk about today is what we're calling our disaster resource guide. And I think it kind of stems from lessons learned from the Thomas Fire. I think most of us have talked about this, especially at the Disaster Council and some of the other community meetings. But we learned a lot from the Thomas Fire. I think one of the key things that we learned as the city is that we all assume that like everybody knows where to look for information during critical events, and we learned that we didn't do a great job of getting information out as a city, and the information we were putting out wasn't necessarily where people were looking for that information. We have talked a lot about the fact that the Facebook page had a ton of posts, but then when we looked later, we saw that 15 people were seeing the Facebook posts, and then there was a new Thomas Fire community page on Facebook that had thousands of people looking at it that we weren't sharing our information with, and we didn't use other resources as well as we could have. The radio station antenna was burnt the first day and wasn't able to be used the remainder of the incident. And we didn't think about going to just kind of old school low tech technology like message boards and putting signage at the grocery stores and things like that. And so we wanted to prepare a disaster resource guide that provided that information in an easy to read format for residents, but also for the thousands and thousands of visitors that are here and maybe don't know what we mean when we say, oh, just go to Nordhoff. And, next question is, where's Nordhoff and what is Nordhoff? So we're trying to put together a document that does that for our residents, for our visitors, for businesses. One of the steps we're looking at moving forward is taking these documents and actually taking them out to businesses and having copies available, taking them out to hotels, to the schools, to the hospital, and all the key stakeholders, and make this information available so that when an incident happens or when there's a fire maybe in Santa Paula and the question is it going to come to Ojai, people can go, well, maybe I should just take a minute and get prepared and see where I should be looking. So it's really a tool for us to try to help communicate better, to help people know where to look for us to communicate during an emergency. Oops, sorry. And also just to remind people to be prepared and to think about things like their large animals, small animals, kids, medications, all those things that are important during an emergency. We've said this a couple times recently, and I just want to explain, this is not intended to be the comprehensive disaster guide that covers every situation. And my joke, which is true, but it almost sounds like a joke, is that we do have a 600-page manual for that, that I hope nobody has to read in the future, because it's quite a manual. This is intended to be a simple, easy to use guide that we can use to help get the community better prepared. And so I really appreciate everybody being here. Like I said, for us, we were like, oh, it'll be great to do it in August when there's time. And I think we heard back and maybe didn't realize that a lot of people, we're impacting people's plans and things. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time and coming out today. I'm going to kind of go around the table for all the stakeholders to introduce themselves. And I also think, Robin, that we have a couple of stakeholders in the audience that we should probably pull up. So we can do that as we're doing the introductions. But so I'll start with, I am James Vega. I'm the city manager for the city of Ojai. And I'm also one of the two people by city code that are included in the city's disaster council, along with the mayor. So again, I appreciate everybody's help with this, and I'll ask to just go down to the left. Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm John McNeil, lifelong Ojai resident, recent retiree from Ventura County Fire, and a member of the city's disaster council.
Hi, Betsy Sticks, Mayor, and I'm just super grateful to everyone here, all the stakeholders, because we're all in this together and clearly we're connected. So, and thank you, James, because we got this, right? And we have this because you're all here and we're all working together. So thank you again.
Hi, my name's Robin Godfrey. I'm the interim assistant city manager, and my job here is to kind of coordinate all of this and pull it together and work with you guys to bring this guide to life. So thank you for being here.
Bob Daddy, State Farm Insurance.
Good afternoon. Barry Parker, Ventura County Fire Chief of Ojai.
Hi, I'm Kim Delacourt. I'm from the Ventura County Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services.
Hello, Ivan Rodriguez, Ventura County Sheriff's OES.
Bill Wyrick, City Council.
Captain Jose Rivera, Chief of Police for the City of Ojai.
Eric Knight, Executive Director, Humane Society, Ventura County.
Tom Francis, Ojai resident.
Kendra King, I'm the Senior Humane Officer for the Humane Society of Ventura County.
Anthony Morales, I'm the current manager of security and safety at CMH in Ojai and recent retiree after 21 years with the Ventura Police Department.
Hi, I'm Robert Hacker. I'm the Director of Facilities at both hospitals at Ventura and Ojai.
Good afternoon, Hadi Lashkari, Chief Administrative Officer at the Ojai Valley Community Hospital.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to, I wanted to start by kind of explaining kind of our room setup quickly. Today's meeting was intended to be kind of the key stakeholders meeting for us to really get any last pieces of feedback or any more suggestions on the plan. We do have a follow-up meeting, and I know this will be covered in the presentation, but we have a follow-up meeting that'll be strictly focused on going out then and educating the public, which we're planning currently to do August 24th. But we had enough inquiries and people who are interested in the conversation that we did want to open it up. And so that's why we kind of have our normal disaster council set up, but we also have the additional seating. And so I just wanted to explain again that so for today, we're here to talk as stakeholders. So we're looking for feedback from all of our partners. And then we're going to start with asking our two primary public safety partners, Police Chief Jose Rivera and our Ventura County Fire Division Chief Barry Parker, to each give a couple of comments about their roles in the emergencies. And so I think we'll start, Chief Rivera, if you're ready, we'll start with you.
Thank you, James. Obviously, being a first responder, our primary responsibility is to respond to the scene. We need to evaluate the threat, whatever the disaster may be, and determine what resources we're going to need to combat the threat. As far as law enforcement is concerned, we'll assist with any needed rescues, evacuations, depending on the threat, and provide security for the area to keep folks out and safe in the area. We'll do traffic control for the location. We'll coordinate with other resources such as the fire department. They're the experts in a lot of these rescues and how to handle these certain situations. I want to thank everybody for the time and effort they put into this guide. This is a great tool to prepare for any type of situation that might affect our communities. It's not the 600-page report like you mentioned, but it is a great guide. It tells you where to go for basic information and what to do in certain situations. And just like any disaster, we never know when it's going to strike. We never know what type of disaster it's going to be, the time of day or evening that it's going to happen. But it's important for everyone in the community that they prepare for any such event. And like I said, the guide is a good tool to use. There's also other sites that folks can go to for information. VC Alert is an excellent location to gather information, how to prepare for such an emergency, especially having a emergency kit to have with them. The city website, another great tool. A lot of great useful information. They put out alerts. And also the Ojai Valley News, they just launched a new website application that you can have on your phone that will give out information as well. So, but as far as law enforcement, we're really concerned about public safety, ensuring that our roads are clear for emergency personnel to respond to and from a site, and to provide information to the public, whether we're out there knocking on doors, ensuring that folks are safe, and passing out information as to when an evacuation needs to happen. So.
Thank you, Chief. And one of the things that we'll keep kind of talking about throughout this is all the coordination between police, fire, the city, the hospital, the school district with the Nordoff site, and just all the coordination because we are kind of, we always talk about being the center of the donut, and the fact that if a fire is what's coming, that's coming from probably outside, and we're going to be coordinating and working with the county and the fire department and police department to get prepared. And for really any of the disasters, there's going to be a collaboration. So I think the chief spoke really well, and I appreciate it, Chief Rivera, about how we all work together during these and coordinating road closures and doing all those things.
And those are really good points. It's just not one entity that handles the situation. It's everybody working together to ensure that the threat is taken care of and that everybody's safe. So
thank you. Chief Parker, who I think got thrown into this relatively last minute, but we appreciated he came to the last disaster council and worked with us to get this close to finalized. Chief Parker, do you want to take a couple minutes and just introduce yourself and talk about your role in these emergency situations?
Sure. Thank you, James. Appreciate that. First of all, I do also want to acknowledge the stakeholders for the amount of efforts and collaboration that's gone into the document so far. It's truly, in order for all of us to be successful, we have to plan. So my name is Barry Parker, as I mentioned earlier, Division Chief with the County Fire, and my responsibility is to oversee the City of Ojai, the operational needs to make sure that the public is safe. So this document is in alignment with the fire department because number one is public safety, but we anticipate and we respond to all types of dynamic events, whether it's fire, debris flow, flood, earthquake. So with the anticipation means that there's an absorbent amount of training that goes along with it so that we're ready when that does occur. And so that's what the county fire department provides for the city of Ojai. That's a professional agency that's able to respond no matter what the event is, meaning all risk. So for example, whether it's the Thomas fire or it was the debris flows of the late 90s, your county fire department was here, trained, professional, and ready. What you get from the county fire department is just more than just a single fire engine or maybe just a brush truck when the weeds start to burn. It means that we've got dump trucks, excavators, backhoes for those debris flows. It means that a hazardous materials response can come into the Ojai and protect the community by collaborating with law enforcement for evacuations or collaborating with the Humane Society for removing large animals and working with the hospital, for example, when we have to do a mass decontamination process. So a lot of collaboration that's going to occur between all the agencies. And that's just a little bit of background, what county fire provides.
Thank you. So we're going to start with a presentation on the disaster guide. But before I do that, I do want to give a thank you and a shout out to Chief McNeil here sitting to my left, who really kind of took the first stab at putting together a coherent guide and really was one of the key people who put a lot of time and effort into it early on. So I do want to say thank you to Chief McNeil. And I think the best form of thank you will be not asking you to speak right now. So with that, we'll turn over. Robin Godfrey, our interim assistant city manager, is going to give us a presentation, just kind of a walk through about the community disaster resource guide. And then following that, we'll kind of work through it or discuss. So Robin, do you want to take it away?
Absolutely. And before I get started, I just wanted to catch a few key stakeholders that we missed on the first round who are either on Zoom or sitting in the audience. And we have Ron Wilson, citizen. And Ron, if you want to introduce yourself.
My name is Ron Wilson. I'm a retired executive life government agency. A lot of work with safety and evacuation with life government agencies and earthquakes. And I've been involved with this system for at least 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dale Hansen. That's really good to know. Thank you. And then Wayne Francis with the ham radio operators.
I'm the radio emergency. Expect to get through with communication, including government center. We are mobilized by OES when the time comes. We practice every week and drills every 2 months. Drills throughout the year, so we practice a lot.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you for coming. And with the Fire Safe Council, we have
and a wildfire vulnerability and evacuation assessment. And we're hoping with the first project that we will have an interactive digital dashboard that community members can access during times of disaster with data layers such as wildfire, wild risk, TRA locations, different community resources, and also are able to post needs. So they're like, we need something like this, and another community member that can help can go to them. And then for the second project, the evacuation and vulnerability assessment, we are taking a look at our current capacities, and we are going to make recommendations based on this research. And we're working in collaboration with the fire engineering consultancy, Jensen Hughes.
That's great. Thank you. And we have two participants via Zoom, Bonnie Luke with Ventura County Sheriff, OES, and Brian Brennan. Weston, could you see if Bonnie or Brian would like to do a brief introduction?
Bonnie, if you'd like to speak now, you may.
Good afternoon. I'm just remoting in coordination with Ivan Rodriguez and Kim Delacorte that are there with you guys in person today, sitting in. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Bonnie.
And Brian Brennan.
Well, yes, thank you, Robin. Thank you. And Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to monitor the meeting. I'm here at Supervisor Levere's office, and we coordinate the CERT program. And we are excited that we are meeting next Wednesday to determine the next CERT classes and the in-person, those will be in-person classes. And we'll be marketing those through on August 24th, helping get that word out to the public. And we'll start those classes. I'm expecting to do that late September, early October, and with an in-person hands-on drill at the same time. And I just wanted to say there's almost 1,200 individuals that have been trained in CERT program in the Ojai Valley. And we're looking forward to re-engaging those folks as we move along, especially keeping in tune with what the mayor has and the disaster council's desires. And it's great to see you have Wayne Francis in the room. He's certainly helps get that word out. The other part of that is the communication. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so I'm going to go through a very brief PowerPoint, just a few slides here to kind of lay the foundation for the work that we're going to do on this document together. So I'm going to share my screen here. Theoretically, there we go. Okay, so James Vega gave us a pretty nice introduction to the whys behind this guide. And it's all about kind of simplifying things. So disaster response can feel complicated, especially to residents who are right in the middle of it. They're not knowing what to do, who is managing things, and just how to keep themselves safe. And this guide, it aims to keep it simple. So when the community understands how we all coordinate, where they can get accurate information, not the false information that floats around so often during disaster, and how to prepare, we as a city and as a community, we build trust with our constituents. And that's important, every day, but it's really essential during a disaster. So we're doing this in large part to build trust. And as James said, this guide is not going to replace the existing documents that we all work from that take us through this important work, but it's just going to add to our collective efforts. The locally produced, kind of easy to digest digital and print document that can change as we change, that we'll revisit regularly. So we talked about our stakeholders, and I know I didn't catch you all here, but we have a lot of stakeholders in this, and it includes healthcare and, of course, the county and police and fire and our council and our disaster council. I'm sure I'm leaving so many people out. The mayor, the ham radio operators, fire safe council, as I said, and then we have residents in our community that are really invested in disaster response. So we want to thank all of them, the media that we will be partnering with. Everybody plays a role in this, and we just want to make sure that this is something we produce together. So we all have collective buy-in and we can get it out to the world, the Ojai world, that is. So a big thank you to those of us who have provided information. Welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. I know some of us, this is like our third time through, and there are a lot of new faces here, so that is fantastic. So today we're going to go through the guide with kind of two sets of lenses. One as a layperson, you know nothing about anything, and you're just looking at this for the first time. And then again, as a subject matter expert, and we have a lot of subject matter experts here, we want to make sure things are clear, most importantly, that they're correct, and that we're hitting the high points that people need to know about. Like I say, we pulled this from a number of different sources, and sometimes I pared it down to make it more simple. So it's really important to take a look and make sure that we got it right, because this is our chance to make sure that it accurately reflects all of you. So a quick look at kind of our process. So James mentioned we started this about 6 months ago. We've had several disaster council meetings. We presented to our city council to kind of get the go ahead on the concept. And we've done some preliminary work with mainly our public safety stakeholders, looking at the kind of the hows and the wheres of what needs to be included in this guide. Today is our stakeholders meeting for the expanded stakeholder group. And then after this meeting today, we're going to take your input, integrate what we can, and then we're going to engage with additional stakeholders that include just members of the community that are interested. We want to put this out there and see how people react to it and how we can make it even better. On August 24th, and you should have a flyer in your little stack of papers there, we are going to have an event kind of like this, but it will be for the larger community. It's going to be a little bit more focused on how do you prepare, with a look at this guide as kind of the secondary portion of it. So this is a great opportunity. If any of you want to come back and be present, or just watch, or maybe provide us information, we'd love to integrate anybody who wants to be included in that. So after we get the community input and all of your input, and we're all happy with it, we're going to present a draft to City Council, and they're going to take a look at it. We may get some additional feedback there, and we will integrate that and then go to print for a short run print. We're going to do short runs of these because we know they'll be updated probably quarterly. I'm kind of thinking maybe we'll update them with the Disaster Council, but we'll have to see. And then we will create an ebook, which will be a link where people can go with a click to get this information in its most up-to-date form. So a huge part of this is engaging the public. We're going to count on our media partners and our trusted stakeholders in the community to help us get the word out when the time comes. That will include, like I mentioned, the direct engagement, the public meeting, the city council meeting. Those are all opportunities. But then when we really want to hit the ground to get the document out there, we're going to work with the hotels, with the businesses, with residents in the community, with houses of worship, with everybody who's connecting with people, and get this out through those, what we call trusted messengers. In addition, We will do web, social media, in person, as I mentioned, personal visits. We're considering another outreach day in November or so. I believe that is Emergency Preparedness Month. Or is that September? Excuse me, the wrong month there, but September. And that would be an opportunity to get these out to the community. They should be finished by then, we're hoping. And also distribute other emergency information from our partners. We'll have a booth at Ojai Day with lots of fun, stay safe things. And this is part of a campaign. We call it kind of a loose campaign called Stay Safe Ojai. The disaster guide is one element of emergency preparedness and of public safety. So as we visit other areas, fireworks safety, wildfire prevention, all of these things, we can address them under this umbrella of Stay Safe Ojai. And on our new website, which should be out later this year, we hope to have a section that focuses on Stay Safe Ojai with all of these elements included. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. What I have done is you all have a copy of the guide in front of you. If you don't, we have some more that we will get to you. Just let me know. And then I also have each page up on the screen. So I'll pull the pages up, and if anybody can think of a more efficient way to do this, please stop me. But I thought we can go through page by page and just kind of read it. If something jumps out, if the section's talking about you and we got it wrong, let us know. Or if you feel we're using words that are not that accessible or that we're missing something, let's just throw it all out there in kind of a free form fashion. And then once we go through, we can kind of come back and look at the big picture and say, is there anything missing, anything substantial that we didn't include? Does that sound workable to everybody?
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Guess I'll just leave this on here. So this is our tentative cover, what to do in case of emergency, a disaster resource guide for the community. This is all very rough draft form. So for our table of contents, and we'll go through this page by page, but we have an introduction. We talk about regional coordination, how to stay informed during an emergency, safe refuge areas and shelters, traffic control, evacuation routes and terms. We're going to be building a map, and we'll get your input on that map on what we really think needs to be on there. And then we have a checklist, an emergency go bag checklist, and then we pay tribute to our partners on the back cover. I want to jump in. At our last meeting, one thing that was brought up was looking at this not as much as an evacuation guide, which is kind of how it started, but more as a disaster resource. So you'll see, those of you who have been involved for the last couple of meetings, that we flipped a couple of things and we adjusted some language to kind of hit home with the point that evacuation is not always the best thing to do. We want to do it when, the people who know what to do tell us to, but we don't necessarily need to hop in our cars and evacuate right away. So you'll see some changes there when you're looking through the content. So we have a choice here. I can read this to you. You can read it yourself and comment back. Does anybody have a preference? I have 4 kids, so I love reading it.
I think we read it ourselves personally.
Yeah, I thought you'd say that.
And I'll note in a couple of spots where things have changed over the versions. But like Robin said, the introduction, when we last went through it, we said this introduction really reads like we're saying, get ready to evacuate, which really isn't the end all be all. And a lot of times is not going to be what we should do. So we rewrote this section in particular to try to refocus on just being prepared, being ready for a disaster versus just being an evacuation guide. And so we made that change following the last disaster council meeting. So that's probably the main change to the introduction page.
Why don't we, if anyone has comments as they're reading through on the introduction page, just raise your hands and we'll give it, 3 or 4 minutes and then just move on if nobody has comments on that page. Maybe 2 minutes.
Yep. I think so.
Okay. This page.
I think we have a comment.
Oh.
That's why we're here.
Hi, thank you. So the first thing I loved about the first paragraph was talking about individual preparedness. I think that's so important. And I love that you tried to focus on that right away. Just one little just correction would be for the Ventura County Sheriff's Department. We're actually the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. So if we could just change that. And then just a question on the stakeholders. I understand that it's almost impossible to list every stakeholder that there is, but interesting question came up about Caltrans versus CHP, or is that kind of incorporated in that? Because, you know, with your evacuation routes, CHP is one of your major stakeholders. So just a question about that.
Yeah, that is a really good question. And they were and are included as one of our stakeholders. They have not so much been involved in these meetings because we weren't really getting into the nuts and bolts of evacuation routes, but we do plan on sending them this guide to review and then including them on the back cover.
Yeah, one of the reasons we included maybe more of a focus on Caltrans was because we've had a number of emergencies, and there's a number of emergencies like landslides, fire, there's a variety, earthquakes, where we actually kind of pre-coordinate with Caltrans because we kind of all pool all our bulldozers and things like that. And so for us, we tend to like really partner with Caltrans probably more than people would expect when we have those types of incidences. So that was why we called out Caltrans in particular. And so, but the note about CHPs is well taken, and we can make sure to follow up with them. But I think to a large extent, I think we're such a small portion of for CHP, since CHP only monitors essentially our two highways, that they're probably going to do what they need to do and kind of go through town, you know? So, but anyway, thank you for the feedback.
So I like to just echo the comments on preparedness. I think, really the emphasis on that in terms of the call to action of the community is really necessary and helpful. I think from an index, if we look at the preparedness of the community, the more prepared the community is in the event of some sort of response plan, the less impacted the healthcare and emergency services are. And I think if we can get that message across as kind of the call to action to our residents and citizens, that would be helpful. So whether it's on this page or when we get into the I think it's the second to last page on the preparation, some of the, the basic emergency supply kits and other things that really should be emphasized in terms of the impact it has to our community.
Anyone else on page 1?
I'm just curious, just sort of building on his comment, if it's possible to just make preparedness more prominent on the page, like you've got introduction, but perhaps maybe it's there or somewhere near there, preparedness or individual preparedness. Just think that's really critical. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just Barry, didn't you say in the last meeting it's 6 hours right after there's a disaster that's the most important? Didn't you say that?
Yeah, typically.
Yeah.
During our first operational period, it's a critical time period because we are scrambling to, first of all, get intel and figure out where our most hazard areas are, which takes time. Infrastructure could be down, whether it's roadways, telephone lines, electricity, which then slows that process down even more. So that first 6 hours is critical for people to be prepared. Just understanding that it takes time to ramp up the machine, as it were, for all these agencies to start to come together. Everyone gets online. We have our operational meetings and briefings based on the intel so that we can be successful.
Thank you. So if we can really spell out in that introduction that those 6 hours are the most important for people and what to do ahead, so you're not chasing your chickens and looking for a litter box during those 6 hours, right?
Yeah. And I just wanted to add, it might not be 6 hours specifically. Okay. It could be 1 hour because we know exactly where it's one event, it's localized to one area, or it could be up to 6 hours. We just don't know, but it's that initial phase is maybe what we could wordsmith that with.
No, I think that's there we are. And we could maybe even include a quote from you and fire on, I'm thinking on that second page, a full quote like we have on the first. So we will hit that one way or another. Okay, moving on to, oops, I'm sorry, one more.
I know that you wanted to change the language from emphasizing evacuation guide to a disaster guide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this I still think that is the first response, you know, like in situations, especially with their silence. So explaining like why evacuation is not a good idea, who to wait, who you will hear from when it comes to that point, and why it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
I think, well, actually, one of my colleagues down here, she and I went through Northridge disaster together a few years ago. We found it, tell everybody to stay off the roads as much as possible because disaster needs the access. Our emergency response teams need the access. They don't need a bunch of gridlocks and they don't need a bunch of traffic. And so if we could put something in there, it will hinder the response from the people that have to get there the quickest and first.
You ready for page 2? Okay. Any comments?
I think I'll explain on some of these, maybe where it's not clear why it's in here. I think I'll try to explain that. I think one of the biggest questions we got a lot following Thomas Fire, but even I would say the first 6 months of the pandemic was a lot of people were asking, you know, why does information come through the county? Why doesn't the city, you know, disseminate its own information? And we do, and we did, you know, when we had city specific orders and things like that. But for the most part, in a widespread, large scale incident, it's going to be information starting with the County Office of Emergency Services and kind of dispersing through to the cities. And so we just wanted to explain that to people. And I think it is a challenge for us up here in Ojai. I think to some extent residents will feel sometimes like we're an island, and it's like, well, why are we waiting to hear what's going on when we know what's going on? And you know, we are always working and trying to you know, also get information and put out information, but we are trying to explain that a lot of this wide scale emergency information is going to be coming through the County Office of Emergency Services. And so that was one of the intents of this page, just to explain that to the average person.
I would agree with that. I understand, you know, there's a little bit of that island feeling. We've heard that feedback too. And I know you do broach on the topic later, but the communication outlets, it might be maybe beneficial to mention earlier on what a resource bcemergency.com is and how at the onset of an incident, especially one that's affecting, you know, large areas of the county, the Office of Emergency Services will activate the Emergency Operations Center, and we will be maintaining that website with up to the minute type of information, and any types of emergency notifications, evacuation warnings or orders are coordinated. That site, as they're being disseminated through the messaging system, they're updated on the site and on our maps. And so maybe somewhere in the introduction or in this preparation area might be a good way to introduce that. And then obviously repeat it throughout as a resource, but that might be a helpful way to communicate that that's how those incident information pieces are coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of in the same theme as my last comment. What about putting it on the cover? Because I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but if it is the most significant resource, it seems like it should be right on the front.
I think we could add like a blurb on the side of that page is kind of what I was thinking about, kind of the first place to look for breaking news kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
no, that's a good idea. And it's kind of a thin line because bcemergency.com is the place that's going to have all of the major information. Sometimes there's local information that doesn't hit that site. So we want to make sure that people know both, that they're going to go to BC Emergency for the primary up-to-date, the big stuff, how to evacuate and all of that. And then if, there are horses running wild in the East End or something like that, we want them to know where to go as well. So we'll think about how to get both of those in there in a more prominent place.
And I give this reminder at every disaster council meeting. I wasn't going to do it for once, but the VC alert, I learned the hard way. I moved here right before the Thomas fire and was like, I didn't get any alert. And it was because I was still registered in Port Hueneme. And so just as a reminder to everybody, like when we talk about preparedness and getting ready, like even now or today or tomorrow, go on and make sure you're registered in your current location so you're getting the alerts. And I think when we get to that information page, we call out VC Emergency and VC Alert as two of the main ways to get quick, accurate information from the county. So.
Anything else on page 2? Okay, let's move on. Is it on page 3 now? Oh dear.
It'd say where to get local disaster information at the top.
Yeah, where to get local.
That's page 3.
We're good? Okay. The lag there. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of where we start into the how to get information. We have a little bit of narrative, and then we're going to jump into just the bullet list. So take some time and see what you have to say.
Think to maybe reiterate some of the comments we got on the last page is we might be able to do some sort of like graphic showing the 3 or 4 main places to look so it pops out a little bit more.
That's a great idea. And on the pages, when we figure out what our final content's going to be and where our room is, we do want to add some graphics, and we'll use, infographics or whatever we can put together to emphasize some of these main points. So this guy will include a link to the high-low siren sound, which I tried to get before this meeting, but I was not successful. Okay. Okay.
Where are we going to have the message boards, the electronic boards posted so we can put this in here so people know where they can go to get information, especially when we go to, power outages, cable interruptions, other things where they don't have access. And it would be really nice to have some type of thought process that we do early or you do early that tells what we're going to get. And I think what's entirely, and I'm going to tell you again, critical is the time. People need to know that this was last updated. So it's not 6 hours old. If it's 6 hours old, it's okay. But they need to know it's 6 hours old. They need to know that it's not current information. That was a disaster on TV. That was bad all the time. So, you know, I don't know if you're going to put 1610, you're going to put this, you're going to put message boards at Soul Park, you're going to do the other things, but people really need to know where you're going to have these things pre-stationed. So they'll know. Somewhere in here, I think you have to tell them. Because if it's dark.
Robin?
Yes, sir.
Every disaster in California, there was one order, get out. Problems in other cities. The Thomas fire, there was one order, get out. And that caused a lot of problems here in Ojai. It took us 2.5 hours to get out there. I didn't leave. Fire was here, police were doing a great job. But the order is a real important decision that has to be made. Very, very important. Because in my neighborhood of Persimmon Hill, most of us stayed, but a lot of people left. And if we would have had a situation like the Paradise situation, it would have been a problem. So I don't know who's going to make that decision for us, but it's very, very critical to do it. I know Hadi at the hospital, because I've interviewed him, did an outstanding job. It was heroic what he did at the hospital. But whoever makes the decision, if it's a chief, if it's you, sir, it's very, very important to analyze that. So we really communicate well to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
It's really a question for Kim and maybe Ivan, but would there be a way to maybe blend the previous page and this page to kind of hit the point you're hitting? And then my second question would be to the bigger group. Would that make sense from a layperson or someone else that's reading the guide?
I think you were reading my mind, John.
Okay.
So I liked what Robin was saying about differentiating between the local and county level communications and resources. I think that's very important when you're talking about a very localized event like your wild horses. Then that's definitely something where your My Ojai app is going to be utilized versus a fire where we're looking at evacuations that's going to be more at a county level. So there could be opportunities maybe to specify local and county and what that would look like and the different resources that might be utilized. But as far as this whole evacuations section, I think that this might be a good opportunity to explore maybe defining these at a more granular level. We have a shelter in place, and then we talk about messaging, and it's sort of kind of converged with, you know, the door-to-door knocks and the high-lows, and those are actually very different things. They're redundant ways of communicating evacuation orders, but they are very different. And so we have an opportunity maybe to define those a little bit in a more understandable way. And then I think this might also be a good place to move the evacuation definitions that you have later on, and warning, the terminology that you have versus warnings, orders, and shelters in place, I think would be really good integrated into this section. And so, but I agree, John, that this is definitely an opportunity where maybe we could move some things around and have it more concise and in one place for readability and to be a little bit more clear as far as what the expectations would be.
Yes.
I also wanted to reiterate what was said at the last meeting. Laura Ward reminded us of the Ojai Valley News app to get emergency communications. So I just think that would be a good thing to add in the emergency communications paragraph.
So it's interesting because I think we moved some pages around to kind of de-emphasize the evacuation part of it, but then it runs into the problem that we just ran into. So we'll take a step back and look at the order really carefully before we come back with this and make sure that we're doing both.
And to that end, so I think last time we looked at this, the next page was before this page. And so the next page has the answers to most of the questions. The next page has the Ojai Valley News listed and the Ventura County Star as our two local media sources. And then it also includes the section on the right. And Robin, you might want to just go to the next page at this point.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
The section on the right that shows what sources we'll use to get information out if and when there's a loss of power or cell phone services. And we listed there the potential locations of, or the locations that we would plan to have printed materials at, which are basically the grocery stores, the Humane Society, Nordoff, because it's typically our shelter in place location, and then Sewell Park Golf Course as well. And then that also talks about the radio station and ham radio collaboration as potential sources when the power is out or cell phone services go out. So I think maybe when we change the order, I think that first page kind of talks about like the standard, maybe like websites and tech tools. And then the second page lists them specifically and then has where to look when those don't work. But I think we can I think we could probably combine those into one page and clean it up a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too. And one thing when you asked about like the signs and where they're going to be, of course, it kind of depends on where the fire is, but we do want to pay attention to the fact that we're going to need to have staff to go out there and put the notes up on the signboard. So we're looking at places that might have people there. So that, the shelter sites, we could probably get somebody at the site to assist us and trying to keep that down to like 4 or so. But that's a challenge, and let's just hope everything doesn't go out at once. Yes.
I do have a question, and hopefully these are remedied. Sewell Park gates were locked last time. When I talked to the people that run it, I said, I thought this was part of our disaster plan. They said, really? No one bothered to tell us.
You talked to the wrong person.
Well, he's the guy that's the guy at least. Yeah. When we had Nordoff, the superintendent at that time did not know that was an emergency, and he did not know that we had an emergency generator and that we had utilities there. And so I'm going to ask and my sheriff from the emergency office here was down at our headquarters at State Farm in Westlake when we had our big earthquake. We asked a couple of questions: who's got the phone numbers and who's got the keys? And so somebody really needs to have those other phone numbers and those other keys, because everybody's not available all the time, because very few of us really know when we're going to have the disaster ahead of time. And so that's why we always had a redundancy in numbers and keys. And you don't want to have the manual we had, because we had a great big manual, but at least for some key places, I would hope that you guys would develop that. I don't think that should be public to everybody. I think that should be in-house with a couple of people, but I would say that we learned that lesson last time, that the two places we relied on heaviest didn't work initially.
I may have misunderstood, so apologies there if not. I think I had thought you were saying that you had checked with Sewell Park about being part of this. And what I was going to say is we are now on our 5th or 6th draft of the contract that we're trying to get the county and Sewell Park to sign on to, so that we initiated it, we drafted it, we revised it. So we are on our 5th or 6th draft. We're trying to get that locked in. The minute we have it locked in, it'll be added to this plan. And I think we might have actually listed it in a couple places, just not as prominently. But that's part of where we talked about having this document be a document that we e-publish, so that when we can update it, and then it instantly on websites will be updated. And one of the things we know is coming is locking in that Sewell Park arrangement.
And one last thing that to me is just the 900-pound gorilla. I don't see any mention of Ojai Unified School District as part of this plan at all.
I have an answer to that.
Fantastic.
Summer. I have been working with them, and actually was it this morning? I heard from my contact who was back in the office and got directed to another contact. So we have space for them here. We talk about schools a little bit, but it's basically something we put in as a space folder, and we are going to add information, not on every school, but basically what we want to do is tell people they need to connect with their schools and understand their school's emergency plan, because we have 11 private schools plus the school district here. So it's going to be different. We can't hit them all, but we will definitely include them and have them. They have this guide and they have reviewed it.
You were first. In service to redundancy, have we finished vetting the low power FM option? Are there no available filing periods? In terms of having FM presence as well as AM, have we determined that that's just not a feasible option or not available for filing periods for licensure?
We have not done that.
Not yet. We're investigating it at this point.
Okay. Just again, in service to redundancy. And another comment I would like to make on the portable e-message trailers, kind of like what Bob just mentioned, city and county will place at key traffic sites. Would that be a nice place to have a link right there to a map of, at least for the initial placement would be?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I will say, we talked about this in the last disaster council, for anybody who missed it. We've put a big emphasis on getting the AM radio station up and running and getting battery backup power and getting a backup transmitter. And then we learned that electric cars no longer have AM radios, which was not something.
Hence my FM comments.
Yeah. And so just so everybody knows, so we talked at the last meeting about, well, okay, so we need to see if there's an FM radio option, because apparently something about the battery interferes with an AM radio signal. And so cars moving forward sound like they're not going to have AM radio. So that takes away one potential tool. So.
Dale?
I was just wondering, and looking at some of the places where, is this just for Ojai? We don't include Miners Oaks. I mean, I realize that's part of the county, but that's all our highways. And if we evacuate, maybe those folks need to know something near Monty and Oakview and all of that. Just curious.
Sure.
It is focused on Ojai because that's kind of where we have jurisdiction. It's kind of what we can make decisions about, but it's done with the lens that, no, we're a part of a much larger Ojai Valley. So we're trying to pay attention to that, but we can't really dictate what's going to happen outside of our city limits. We can only coordinate with the folks that are making those decisions. So that's where that's coming from.
Yeah, the first call I got in the EOC during the Thomas fire was like 2 a.m. I think the second day we got a call that somebody needed to evacuate 18 horses because the fire was approaching Miners Oaks. And so they were calling frantically to get us out to Miners Oaks. And so I only mention that because I think the reality is, when they called, we didn't say, well, wait, technically you're outside of the city, so you're going to have to call someone else. And so we know that that's not going to be the case. We have to aim this at the areas we control, the jurisdiction we have, the tools that we have. But I expect that if you live in Miners Oaks, you're probably still going to turn your radio on to 1610. You're still going to have the app. I think last time we actually looked, we had more residents outside of the city with the app than we do within the city with the app. And I think that's true for our Facebook page and everything else. So we were trying to give the tools for the Valley, but we did write it as, it's a city document. So.
And with the understanding of certain references, like when we reference healthcare, which serves the Ojai Valley, police, of course, serve the Ojai Valley. So there's a little bit of both going on in there, but we can't really tell the county what to do outside of our city limits. Yes.
As a note, we are the Humane Society of Ventura County, not the Ojai Valley Humane Society.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
I know that.
It sounds great, but
I like the ring of Ojai.
So on this information resource list, I think this is great. I think that under the County of Ventura, we also have the opportunity on just touching back on the preparedness and individual preparedness. We have a whole website dedicated to that. It's called readyventura.county.org. And so we've got a lot of wonderful resources there that people can utilize to really enhance their individual capabilities. And we do emphasize that individual preparedness is the core of success in community resilience. So if we could add that as a resource, that would be great. I know you have it attached to VC Alert. We do have actually a separate site that people can go to at vcalert.org. And they can also get there through Ready Ventura County. So that we've made sure that there's many opportunities to get there to register. And then if it would be of value, I can provide you with the sheriff's office social media handles to follow. Yeah.
So glad you're here to catch things like that.
Oh, and one more thing, the radio stations, just to touch on what you were saying, we actually have a list of radio stations that serve the whole county, not just Ojai, but in light of the recent FM knowledge, there are additional radio stations that we list in our emergency preparedness guide that we can provide those to you as well.
Another just suggestion on when the power is out. One of the things we've noticed at the hospital is certainly when there's extended power outages, folks try to kind of get attracted to the light. As a hospital, we have we have emergency power, and it's really set up for our operations. But I've been surprised sometimes folks that just want to come and charge their phones, or folks that use sleep apnea machines in the evening, O2 machines, kind of with getting regulators in their homes, and then concentrators and so forth. And so, I think one useful dot here might be over extended periods of times that we might, if the city could list sites for emergency power access. So if those batteries need to be charged, or on the preparation side, if they can look at home generators and other types of things for if they have O2 concentrators and so forth, that would be helpful. We're fortunate with the Thomas fire. We actually assisted because we weren't heavily impacted. So we were able to we had some folks stay with us to be able to meet those needs. But in a true disaster where we're impacted, I don't think we would have been able to do that. So.
Yeah, that might be something for us to consider, like at the actual evacuation sites, if you just want to plan on having power. And then also, and I think I mentioned this before, but when we set up this ebook, we can set it up so the permalink will go to a cover page that could have, late breaking news. And with our new site, we'll have, of course, late breaking alerts on the site, so we can hit all those changing elements. Also, the information resource list. Weston, is anyone on Zoom?
No.
Okay. Okay. So just holler if they do. Okay.
Will do.
Okay. So again, keeping yourself and family safe. This is just a mention of
Mic, please, Robin.
What's that?
Mic, please.
Oh, thank you. This goes over safe refuge areas, which I think is a foreign concept. It was to me. I'd never heard of them before, so I'm assuming no one else had heard of them. But kind of getting that out there, what it is. It's a place to stop to kind of get out of the way of traffic. And then shelter locations. We listed the two primary shelter locations. Clearly, there could be different ones if the fire is, looming down on Nordoff, but we're just going with the basics at this point. So take a look and let us know.
Yeah, and this was one of the areas we listed, the Sewell Park golf course parking lot. Again, that's the one that's in process that we're working on the final agreement on. And so that was the idea of that, was a safe refuge area as needed, knowing that we have the Nordoff High School and the county fairgrounds as this kind of the standard two shelter locations.
If I could ask a question about the safe refuge areas, I'm familiar with the concept, but I wasn't aware that they were actively being used. Can you help me understand in what context this would be utilized, and if this would be something that would be announced as far as emergency messaging from the city, or how you intended to utilize that? And specifically, I guess, in relationship to the potential for any evacuation warnings and orders.
Yeah, I think just like big picture concept, it's if Nordoff High School during the Thomas fire had issues at various points where either people couldn't get in because the parking lots were backed up, and the other was large animal trailers couldn't get in. There wasn't room for any of them. And so one of the main things we were starting to try to work on the safe refuge area for was to have another parking lot option, so that, for example, like what I would, one of the things I would kind of plan to do is right away say, if you have a horse trailer and you're staying in the valley, you can get it to, Sewell Park Golf Course. And we have what is it, 80 spots, I think is what we're trying to get.
Yeah.
80 parking spaces, which is probably, 15 trailers or 20 trailers or something like that. But so it's kind of another option. And then I think what we would try to use it for is like specific purposes, like the large animal evacuation, in partnership, obviously, with the Humane Society and trying to work with them as well. So.
Mr. Francis.
Yes, we've got to address the Nordhoff issue. Nordhoff during Thomas Fire is another world from where we are today. The assumption has always been, and it has been for years and years, the Red Cross shelter at Nordhoff High School. There really is not the ability to do that shelter at Nordhoff right now. It was always local Red Cross that set it up. We don't have a local Red Cross. That's where the knowledgeable people were. It was local volunteers that went over and got the Red Cross trailer, which I assume is still at the fire department, the police state, the fire station in Miners Oaks. So the local volunteers had done this over and over. They knew exactly what to do. It was always a smooth operation, and we had periodic drills to do this. Amateur radio would set up when the shelter was there. All of this. And right now, if you had to set up the shelter, you've got to hope that the phone system is working so you can call Camarillo, or there won't be anybody to set it up. So we can't just assume that it's going to be set up easily. It's just not the same as it was during Thomas.
Right. On the Soul Park issue, what happened during the Thomas Fire? Ryan Blatz, a city council member, opened the gate because he's a golfer, and he saved at least 400 lives and horses, etc. Without that being open, it potentially would have been a major disaster happening. And to echo the gentleman's situation about Nordhoff, I actually did Nordhoff, the evacuation center, about 30 years ago with Pentas and one of the fire chiefs. And I was sort of shocked what happened during the Thomas Fire because there wasn't any real coordination. And as you listed, there's no one responsible. Who is responsible for the shelter? Originally I thought it was the sheriff or the fire, but everyone left. The supervisor left, the school district left, the staff left, the mayor left, everyone left the city. And then we had to fend for ourselves at the evacuation center. And it was a real situation. So we need real leadership, from the stakeholders to make sure that we have the leadership and the water and everything needed. I personally bought water for the evacuation center because there was none. And so whoever the leader of the important agencies are, we need their action to help us. For example, in conclusion, if it happened today, who's in real charge of the evacuation center? Can anybody answer? Go ahead.
Thank you for the clarification on the safe refuge. That's much appreciated. But I do have good news on the shelter front. Post Thomas and Woolsey Fire, the county really took into consideration some of the obstacles that were in place and launched a huge effort in partnership with the Human Services Agency, Red Cross, and the Salvation Army. And we have a whole system in place to provide sheltering in areas that are needed. It starts with a temporary evacuation point, which is the Nordhoff High School. And from there, that gives people a place to come. They register for services. They have time, a minute to take a break and see what their options are and what their desires are for providing for their family in a safe place. And then if the need arises or the decision is made that we need to have a sustained evacuation, then Human Services Agency will open an emergency shelter at that location. And so all of the systems are in place. We have trailers pre-stocked with inventory. They're ready to deploy at a moment's notice. So the sheltering, I promise you, will not look at all like it did in the Thomas Fire. We've done a lot of hard work and a lot of effort, a lot of training, a lot of exercise. And Human Service Agency has really stepped up and really built that system. And we're really proud of it. And so I can, and actually when we get to that shelter location section, I'd be happy to provide you with some additional updated information to include.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
May I add? Thank you very much for your comments. We really appreciate your service. I think it's just really, really important that we have someone that's going to be in charge. And what you're saying, the sheriff will be in charge. The sheriff will be in charge, and you'll have people there that will support whatever needed to be support.
Yeah, so the mass care and shelter operations are run through our emergency operations center at the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. And that piece is really being spearheaded by our human services agency. The point person right now for setting up those shelters is Stephen Carnassus, and he has a team of people that are on call to set that up. And we actually have former Red Cross manager as part of that human services agency team now. So we have a very close-knit relationship with the Red Cross and the Salvation Army, and they are ready to deploy those temporary evacuation point trailers. And then from there, they assess the needs of sheltering.
Thanks. It's really good information. I think I will, just to kind of respond to the speakers as well. When we all heard what we had heard, and so, I don't know if it's necessarily the exact story, was that Red Cross did reach out to the county at some point and said that they were not going to be able to operate all of these shelters anymore, and so I think all of us had the reaction of like, well, wait a minute, we rely on Red Cross, we know Red Cross, they know us. So I don't think any of us were like thrilled, but when we heard that, but we have had at some of our council meetings, we talked through that change. We had items on where we talked about how we could coordinate with the county and the Human Services Agency. And we had Stephen Carnassus actually come to a couple of council meetings and speak to how that was going to work. And so I think we've have made really good progress towards that, and kind of just thinking about how that's a big change. I think one thing we might do in the coming months is at one of the next disaster councils, probably invite Stephen in and talk about how that can work. So
I just want to say thank you, Kim. That is huge. So huge step forward. Much appreciated.
I got a comment, and actually HSA hasn't just been practicing this. They actually done it in real emergency. The fire back in Herbs in Thousand Oaks. I think it was 6 p.m. And they were ready to deploy within 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think they were there within 30
yeah,
minutes.
they were there within 30 minutes.
Robin, just wanted to go into a little more on that safe refuge area idea. From a strategic standpoint, when you look at this guide, we all know what the goal and the objectives of the guide is and the wide audience that it's presented to. So that has its own challenges, right? And if you script it too tight, then we can have problems, right? And that's, I can see the fire and police chief shaking their heads. Absolutely, right? So if you train everyone and it's scripted so tight that, hey, when the bell rings or the alert is sounded that you go left, well, left is where the risk is. You can see the problem. So when you only have 4 ways in and out of this area that we're trying to set a guide for, we wanted additional options, these safe refuge areas. So if the risk is in front of you as you're exiting one of those routes, or the route becomes blocked for whatever reason, there are options. And that's what the safe refuge area is. So if you do get on the road, at least there's potentially another option. So that was the thought behind it. And ultimately, since we have 4 ways out, we should have at least 4, 1 in each route of these safe refuge areas would be the ideal.
I would like to offer up a couple of other areas that we might consider. We can probably get 200 horse trailers at Bryant Circle, and Bryant Circle has got 2 access points, never one access. We've got Fulton, we got Bryant, that entire area. We've got enough parking for 500 cars off street, and we can easily get 200 horse trailers in that circle. The other thing, and I'm not here to speak for them, we might ask them, is Boku is the entry to town. It's got 98 parking places. and it's got the park and ride there. And it's easy, distinguishable, and people could just pull in there, so they don't have to come into town, and they don't have to overload. So just those two places have got the most available parking, where we have enormous amount of clearance. They're not going to probably be in the Ambercast, and we probably are not going to have any issues with the brush like we do at Daly and Montgomery and all those areas. We're not on the edge. So that's my best thought.
On another note, just looking at the title of the page, keeping yourself and family safe, we could also talk about the prevention side and delineate that by like individual preparedness, delineated by disaster. So, we deal with wildfire. So I'm thinking of like when it comes to fire, how a family could harden their home. And we would be happy to provide with realistic, kind of home improvements that families can take initiative on their own. And we also are going to have some trainings coming up on home hardening. So if you want to have, a link to that for any interested resident to know how to harden their homes, we'd be happy to provide that too.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on big refuge areas or shelter locations? Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I was here throughout the Thomas Fire, just helping a few people that I knew with keeping their houses safe, and keeping them from burning down, keeping them wet. And so I found Soul Park to be super useful. And I also felt that it was one of the safest refuge spots, just from an instinctual perspective, because there's just so much open land, a lot of room, a lot of clearance. And yes, there are trees there, and yes, they could probably catch on fire from embers, but just a lot of open area, not just the parking lot. It seems like if the parking lot was full, there could potentially be a plan for people to just drive right out onto that front area between the parking lot and Ojai Avenue. A lot of room there, massive amount of space. I think that's actually the biggest open space that's accessible by car probably in our whole community. So I don't think we should limit that to just horse trailers. It should just be, because if we really have a situation where lots and lots of people can't get out, that's a huge opportunity, not just the parking lot. So I just wanted to raise that issue. And then the other thing I wanted to say is my recollection, I was in communication a lot during the Thomas Fire with our former mayor, Johnny Johnston. And I believe, just to be clear, he was in and out of Ojai throughout the fire for various reasons. For example, he evacuated his family at first. And he also evacuated a 90-year-old woman that lived a few blocks from his house. So that was the reason he left, but he didn't just leave and not come back. My understanding is he was back here every day, sometimes leaving at night. And also he went down to the Ventura County Fairgrounds, to the command center, Caltrans, where that was the hub of everything that was happening. So, I believe our mayor in the past was actually going where his instincts were telling him was the most important place to go every day. And, but I believe he was in Ojai every day. And I would imagine our present mayor would also be in Ojai every day. Thank you.
Heck yeah.
She's like,
I'm not leaving. Any other comments on this page before we move on? Yeah. Okay. So this is where we touch on schools, and this is filler content that we put in there waiting to hear from Nordoff, but please do kind of read through and feel if that, let us know if that feels like good information for parents. And then healthcare resources. This is another area where we just want to make sure that we're close to capturing what you wanted us to.
Robin, we had a couple of minor edits on the healthcare with the bed count and so forth, and we'll just email those over to you if that's okay.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I think people with kids may know, but I understand that the school district has a tool for communication. I don't know if it's like text messages or what it is, but I've heard that they can get the word out very quickly through those. So Robin and I were talking, we assume that they're going to want to provide that information here and just remind, parents where to look for information. So we included some placeholder language, but we're following up with them to try to get that and include that. So.
We'll probably also want to include something on how the transition happens when Nordhoff becomes an evacuation site from school to evacuation site, just to put parents' minds at ease. Yes.
I do a lot of volunteer work in the schools for many, many years, and I work very, very closely with them. Who is going to communicate to the schools and their email list if we do have a disaster? Do we have something in the works that either sheriff or fire will contact the superintendent? Because during the Thomas fire, there was very little leadership from the schools and other areas. And I think that would really be important because what do we have now? 1,200 kids or so and their parents. So who would contact the schools is what I'm asking, if we have a disaster. Chief?
It would probably be the sheriff's department that would contact the parents, or not the parents, but the school administrators and let them know the pending disaster. And they could notify the parents. I know the schools are pretty good about sending out notifications. My kids go to school in Pleasant Valley School District, and whenever they send out a notice to the parents, it's a voicemail, recorded message, email, and a text message. So you get all three all of a sudden. So they're really good about that. I will check with the superintendent here to see if they have the same type of notifications. It'll put a contact also during these type of situations. I know there's a lot of private schools as well. So we'll have to coordinate point of contacts for those as well.
Chief, do we need a checklist, for example, on who's going to be responsible? We have a disaster. It happens today. Do we need some kind of a checklist that you send a lieutenant out or you send an officer out to the school giving them information? How would that work?
We'll probably have a checklist on the notifications that need to be made to all the schools. I'm not going to appoint somebody at this moment, like say a sergeant, because that sergeant may be taking care of other situations, but somebody will be appointed to make those calls. It could be somebody that's not sworn, maybe an office staff member that'll just go down the checklist to make sure all notifications are made. Yep.
And sir, from the fire perspective, when we have a major fire, for example, like the Thomas fire, we look at the number one, the major life threats, which schools are included in that. So we knew Basant School was in the way. I know it's not the city of Ojai, but we knew that was in the path. If we don't have Sheriff TRT with us, I'll send the fire engine over there, right? That first fire engine gets there, the only one there was a janitor because they knew they were gone. So when it comes to your school superintendents, principals, teachers, I guarantee most of them are on these highlighted lists on these pages because those children are their number one priority. They've drilled, they've gone through this exercise multiple times, just like we're doing right now. They're committed to doing the same thing. They have a responsibility that they have to show a plan that they're ready for a fire. So it's a priority for us. And like I said, if sheriff is not there from the fire perspective, it's one of our priorities is to get those children evacuated immediately.
And I'd just like to follow up on that because thank you, because I evacuated with Besson Hill School, I think 25 teachers and 100 kids, and it was a really well planned, event. And our head worked so closely with fire and police, and it was great. And we were told to go to Oak Grove and spend the night there, and then we ended up going to a motel after that. I think 5 buildings burned down up there. And then the fire went through and then went through again. And I mean, the kids were great because we had spent weeks getting ready for it. And schools do that. Teachers do that. That's a top priority.
And since we're on the topic and we've been kind of circling around sheltering in place versus evacuations. So the earlier we can lean forward on an evacuation, and there's an immense amount of planning that goes on between sheriff and OES, where we're drawing these polygrams and we're looking for a systematic approach of how to do it. We don't just open up the floodgates. We're trying to systematically get people off the hill and onto the valley. We also understand that different people have different experience based on their knowledge. You know, if you've just moved to Ojai, you haven't experienced the Thomas fire. And so the first time you see smoke in the air, it's going to be pretty scary. And the probability is that they're going to leave. They're going to heed the warnings and they're going to get down to the flatland. But for folks who have been through quite a few fires up here and they have a little bit more experience, their comfort level might be much different and they might choose to stay. But they just need to understand, if you choose to stay, there's not the guarantee. We can't guarantee your safety at that point if you stay in your homes. So leaning back towards, the schools, we want to evacuate schools as early as possible, because sheltering in place sometimes in a school, yes, it's a solid building, but we saw the outcome. Had we had those children there, the outcome could have been much different.
And kids are generally more obedient. They evacuate quickly.
Just to add one last thing to that is that it's actually practiced quite a bit where schools are either sheltered in place or evacuated. And unfortunately, we see it on the news all the time with the school shootings, but more so around here. I mean, you could have a grass fire, 2-acre grass fire, the smoke's going over a school. That school is notified right away, whether it's through the dispatch center on a phone call to whatever the contact is on a list, because there are lists at the dispatch centers. And I'm looking at the gentleman that brought the question up, Ron. Sorry, Ron. And so I think just to reassure that concern, it's practiced quite a bit, and the schools execute it very well because they do it quite a bit. So anyway, just an added comment there.
That notification could be made by an officer from the city as well, or from, like you mentioned, our dispatch center. They have the ability to look at a wide map and pinpoint all the schools in that particular area that's being affected by a fire or any other type of situation. They can use reverse 911 also to alert the community, notify schools, and let them know what's going on, and they can take the appropriate action based on their policies and procedures as well.
On a less direct level, as PIOs talk, we have an emergency PIO team. So we will have an awareness of which schools have been evacuated, so we can share that information with the broader community just to kind of know what's going on and where. Is that it for this page? Okay, here's where we get into some of the nuts and bolts about evacuation and traffic control. We moved this toward the end, so that the guide was not all about this, but felt it was important to include some information, because if it does happen, we need people to know that it's serious when it's announced. So take a look.
Robin, may I go real quick? John, thank you for bringing that up about the other sites on the evacuation. I think it's sometime down the line that would be very, very important to do for this valley. And if we have it, it's going to be really, really professional to help the people, especially if the roads are blocked. And it helps the sheriff also and fire. You know, like you have a Soul Park golf course, so San Antonio School or the Oakview Community Center, or, you know, those kinds of areas where people could go to. It'll be a nationwide story. And I think you all should be commended, because this will be a nationwide story at some time. All the interaction that you guys are all doing here, it's going to be really, really important to helping this community and other communities.
Anything on evacuation?
I'll just note while everybody's reading that I think the idea is, I kind of feel like we all know there's, you know, 4 ways in, 4 ways out. And so the idea was identifying those for people that are, I think this is one of those areas that would be for people that maybe aren't familiar. Maybe somebody's here for, you know, staying at a hotel, or maybe, you know, new to the area, because I do think we had a lot of people move into the area during the pandemic, for example. And so, you know, if somebody doesn't know, if they only moved here recently and they're used to coming up from Ventura to Ojai on the 33, and that's shut down. I know there are people that I've talked to have said they've never gone around the Santa Paula route, for example. So I think the idea was to just kind of inform people, like, these are the 4 options during an emergency. You know, we're going to have more information about which option is going to be used at which time. So.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, looking at all this movement on the highways, I'm still thinking about the AM 1610. These are people going to be on the road. They're not going to have access. Well, they've got their phones that may or may not work, but they're not going to have all these internet connections. And they may very well be completely dependent on 1610. And so one is a question: did the city get the roadside signs that say tuned to 1610? So we do have those for each of the 4.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So
we have they're kind of like the orange triangle construction signs, and they say emergency tuned to AM 16.
Right. Okay. That's really important. That's what we needed that long ago. And that's really important.
We got those recently.
Okay.
And we can add, maybe this would be a good place. We add a little kind of blurb or graphic about reminder, you know, if evacuating, tuned to AM 1610, and we can show one of those signs, what they look like.
And possibly the FM station that we hook up with.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of the radio idea. It just seems like, since AM radios or just a little transistor radio is so cheap, battery powered, it just seems like if we look at all the resources that are going into this, it's a relatively minimal expense to give these away to the community in advance, and then also have them available perhaps at all the locations where there's going to be information posted or whatever at these centers, you know, these shelter in place centers, Soul Park, have them there. So if people need to leave or whatever, they're going to go up to 33 where they can't get anything, because that's the only way to go. You know, an AM radio would be nice. Even if the AM radio may not work because you're behind a mountain or whatever, there's probably going to be points in the route where it would work. Just seems so inexpensive and such a no-brainer. And then we're not caught up in the saying of, well, what about the electric cars? The electric car people can go pick up a radio either in advance or on the day of.
That's a great idea. And I know we had talked about that for our special event. That's something that we're looking into.
And I said this at the disaster council, so it might sound repetitive to some, but so we'd actually looked at doing this when we did our first emergency preparedness day, with the logic of, we're 7,000 people. We could probably order 1,000 radios and hit everybody. And we found somebody who made them for like $4 a piece or something. We're like, hey, $4,000, and we hit 90% of our community. And then we tried to put an order in, and this was like, you know, right when that supply chain shortage was hitting, and it was like 18 months to get them delivered or something. In hindsight, we should have ordered them, because we'd probably be getting them about now. But so I will put that on my follow-up list, though, because we are ordering things like the flashlights and things like that as kind of giveaways for when we do our emergency preparedness meetings. So we'll follow back up on, circle back around to the AM radio idea. So.
We have a hand raised online from Bonnie Luke. Bonnie, I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi there. I just had a quick question regarding, I see the last sentence on this particular page focuses on being prepared to shelter in place, to move to a safe refuge area or evacuate if ordered. And I think I'd really like to emphasize that, we've worked really hard with HSA regarding, sheltering options and the TEP concept, and maybe finding a way to ensure that the temporary evacuation point is added to this particular page, and that the emphasis is really placed on there will be information put out that you should or can go to a TEP and get further instructions on where permanent sheltering or sheltering options will be, and that should really be, a foremost thing, to follow the instructions of emergency personnel regarding whatever that evacuation terminology is, whether it's, a warning and you've got animals and you need to get a little head start, or to go to a TEP because you're under an evacuation order. I'm a little concerned about having the safe refuge area and having people directed to, move to a safe refuge area, because those are not necessarily designated areas, and they may actually, end up with concentrations of people there that then become a liability or a risk. And so we want to make sure that that messaging is consistent and standardized, especially when you're looking at a large scale disaster, as you guys are discussing, where the resources of the city itself will be overextended and be relying on that greater community and countywide collaboration.
Bonnie, I think I got what you said, and maybe I'm switching it to emphasize, please make sure you follow orders, which may include sheltering in place, moving to a safe refuge area, or evacuating, and then having a link to maybe VC emergency right there. Is that what you were saying? Okay.
Well, the temporary evacuation point concept that has been initiated is sort of the goal will be to go to a temporary evacuation point in order to funnel and have people directed so that they're not necessarily clustering in areas that are at risk or could be a potential risk. And I'm not sure how the safe refuge areas are anticipated to be incorporated as far as, location, or if those may be other locations where, groups would be looking to set up shelter. They may be, those are decisions that will be made by the incident command people, I assume.
So maybe we want to pull out safe refuge area right there and just say, be prepared to shelter in place or evacuate as if ordered, and then say something about you may be asked to move to a safe refuge area to alleviate traffic or something like that, but to address that differently, because it's really not part of that decision.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, just to echo what Bonnie's saying, I agree. I think that could be a little bit confusing. What I understood from the explanations provided here today about the safe refuge area was that was a place where people could go if they knew they may needed a little bit more time to evacuate, to get out of a spot that might potentially be impassable. So maybe somebody with large animals who has a feeling that they might be in the fire path, but there's no official warnings or orders issued yet, that they could go there so that they could be in a more accessible place to then follow such orders. Am I understanding that correctly? Okay. And then also kind of discussed if it might be a safe place to go if you find yourself in an area that might be impassable due to fire, to get out of the roadway.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm understanding that correctly. Okay. So then I'm kind of viewing this, for lack of a better explanation, of kind of like when you're boarding an airplane, if you feel like you're going to be needing a little bit extra help or advance notice, this might be an initial starting point until you receive a warning or order. And in that case, we would be referring people to a temporary evacuation point for further instructions.
Yeah, I think the key is that all the language is the same. And when we were drafting some of this, it's like it's got to match what the public safety agencies are going to call it, for one, and what they understand it to be, right? So I think we really do need to nail this down, because it can start to get confusing, because First time hearing about a temporary evacuation shelter, right? So is that the term, right?
Temporary evacuation point then has
Point,
the potential
yeah.
to transition to an emergency
Right,
shelter.
which could be a safe refuge area, and we don't want to make that too confusing, right? So, so I think each of the ideas have their place. The challenge obviously is how to put it on one page for general audience, right? So I think as long as County OES is on the same page as what the city's trying to do in this guide, as far as the language used, that's the key.
I think we probably do need to safely emphasize that the refuge point is a city
That was my
provision.
question, yeah.
And it's not something that we would necessarily rely on when we're giving warnings or orders from a county perspective. And so I think if we could really maybe narrow that down to its specific intended uses, like we just talked about, maybe somebody with the large animals who said, you know what, I know if the fire comes through here, I'm not going to have time for even the warning. And I need to be well prepared and out of there ahead of time, and just maybe market it that way. So that it's not confusing, because we do have our identified TEP spots, temporary evacuation point, already identified, and the emergency shelter is already identified, unless of course it does find itself in an evacuation zone. But there are several other pre-identified areas throughout the county that we might switch gears and rely on those locations. But to my knowledge, the locations that you're talking about as refuge points have not been identified as potential shelter opportunities. And so I wouldn't want to.
We did work with Stephen Carnazes on that. So.
Yeah.
And I think we may want to go back where we first introduced safe refuge areas and address that they are city created. So I'll work on that.
Well, and it's more of a preparation term than it is a true now time for emergency. I don't think public agencies are going to put out the term, hey, there's a safe refuge area over here. It's not the evacuation order. This is the route you need to take, and this is where you need to go, type of thing. Because there is another term, I don't want to confuse the topic, but just maybe bring another perspective to it, is a temporary refuge area, TRA. Is that what you're going to talk about, Barry? So Matilla Canyon has a pre-identified temporary refuge area. And you can imagine if a fire comes through there, which has plenty of history, there's only one way out of that canyon, right? Matilla Canyon. So with coordination from the homeowners and county fire, they cleared an area, and the idea is it's a temporary place to go. You can drive, you can walk, you can ride a horse, whatever. And it's a clearing where you can kind of ride out the fire without having to try and drive through it, or shelter in place with a house that may not be able to withstand that fire. So that's called a TRA. And this is kind of I don't want to say it's a play on it, because as far as I know, safe refuge area is an official term. It's just not maybe recognized the same way. So that's a little bit of the background on it. Sorry, Barry.
No, I'm going to ride your coattails. So the other piece of this too is the benefit of saying the word temporary is it puts it in everyone's mind that this is a temporary place for me to be. So that you don't have people going to a safe refuge area saying, I'm going to camp here for 5 days because who's going to kick me out? I can stay here for 5 days, and there should be water and there should be portable toilets. So it's just something to think about. If people are going to be there for 4 or 5 days, what's the impact to the infrastructure of the park? Is there vacuum trucks that are going to come clean it out? Is toilet paper? You start to get into a sanitation issue. People are cooking, they're eating, they're sleeping, there's traffic control, there's security. But if you name it, perhaps a temporary, it puts it in everyone's minds that this isn't long-term. This is for you to kind of rehab yourself or get things together before, so that you can make a plan to perhaps evacuate.
Animal evacuations. You guys are up. So we had opportunity last month, I believe, to meet with the Humane Society, and thank you for that. We've got some great information. Microphone. Thank you. We got some great information meeting with the Humane Society, and thank you. Let's just make sure that we captured the most important things that you wanted to get out there.
I think this is one of the key areas we saw in the Thomas Fire where people really need to prepare like in advance. And I didn't really realize that, you have to train horses to get on a trailer for months before. it happens. And just, so I talked earlier about, we put an all points bulletin out for everybody who owns a horse trailer. And I remember horse trailers flooding into the valley, but there were still a lot of people who then couldn't get their horses on trailers. So I think one of the things we're hoping to do is remind people, and that's horses specifically, but dogs, cats, or whatever other pets, think about being prepared ahead of time. So.
Yeah, thank you. It's really encouraging to see the space dedicated to this in this document. I only have really one note. I think it would be helpful to have the address and phone number of the Humane Society on this page. I also noted that there are 2 spots that suggest evacuating at the warning level. And if you notice that it's on there twice, please leave it on there twice. It really is one of the most important things. And I'll echo Hadi's comment earlier in that this is another one of those places, I think, in the document that we can remind people that being prepared is not only to help ourselves and our immediate family and our pets. When we are prepared, we are helping the community. And when people are prepared with their animals, they are going to be also helping those who then come with, then in the community come with their animals. I don't think it needs to be included in this, but I do want to make people at the table aware that we are specifically prepared for these disaster situations with ERT volunteers who've been specifically trained in everything from the administration of intake to taking care of the animals in a disaster. Senior Humane Officer King really coordinated that. And I'd like to, she knows a lot more about it than me. I'd like to give her just a few seconds to say what happens when people arrive at the Humane Society during a disaster with pets.
So a lot of times it really depends on the animal that is being brought in. During the disasters that I have been a part of, at least in the 8 years that I've been at the Humane Society, we deal with a lot of livestock, horses, cows, goats, pigs, you name it, chickens, turkeys, we've had it all, seems like. So we do try to make the process as easy as possible. And our volunteers that we have that have been with us for a long time, that are trusted volunteers, have been a really great tool for us to use in the time of emergencies. And they really help us from the intake point to reuniting those animals with their owners. It's highly important for anybody who is evacuating a large animal to put some type of identification on them. I can personally say that I've had to, after the Thomas Fire, go down and try to match up what this animal is, who it could potentially belong to, because that didn't have any type of identification. And sometimes people bringing an animal to us is not the actual owner of that animal. So just a little 2 cents.
I appreciate that comment. During some certain fires, we'll have livestock it's typically livestock, and we'll see, I gave a guy a can of orange spray paint just to write his cell phone number on his cattle, so hopefully that's helpful for you guys. At least you'll know who to call. You know who it came from.
Can I add, the Humane Society did a remarkable job, during the Thomas fires. They were all heroes. One of the areas, I'm not going to mention any schools. I don't know if we need a separate page for private schools. When you're meeting with the private schools, are you going to include animals also? Because there were some situations that some of the private schools that have large animals, they got on the roads and it was pretty dangerous and it was all blocked up. I know when I did the Northridge earthquake, in large, we went to government offices, but we had the sheriff take us around to the different government offices to see about the damage. Would that be something that you could put in a separate page, what the responsibility of the different important agencies would be for the private schools, like Thatcher and Ojai Valley School, something very, very simple. And what are they going to do with the animals? Or are we going to take it for granted that they're going to do something, because during the Thomas fire, it was a pretty tough situation. I don't know if you have any comments on that, John, if it affected fire or.
Yeah, no, I don't have any negative comments, but the obvious is, you have a large amount of animals and vehicles and trailers, everything else on our already clogged streets. It's a challenge for sure. I think part of when we were initially discussing this guide and kind of the objectives of it, one of it is you can only force certain entities to do certain things, right? And a couple of those schools aren't even in the city limits, so that there's an obvious issue there, right? But what it is designed to do is encourage and have their plans complement this guide, right? And you can go to those entities and just say, hey, like we have this guide, we'd like to engage you with it, and have it complement the guide or vice versa, however that goes. So that's the thought behind it.
That'll be outstanding.
Okay, if you have nothing else on animal evacuations, we're going to move on. Folks, we are almost to the end here. So we're going to have a map. I think I mentioned it at the last meeting. We're going to have a map illustrated, so it's not such a technical map, but I have this up for now. Just so we can get some general input on what we want to show on this map. I mean, clearly we want to show Nordhoff High School. We will show City Hall, Soul Park Golf Course, any temporary safe refuge areas will be marked. We'll have a separate layer for marking. So we're going to have our general map. We'll be able to change our markers as needed. But I just wanted to go around the room and see, what do you think? Humane Society, of course, will want to mark on there. What's missing?
I'm curious, has the Ojai Valley Inn been contacted?
They will be contacted in
Okay.
our next wave of
Okay.
outreach. And there are a few things marked on here that we're not going to include. They were just on the Google map.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this map is a placeholder because we're working with our partner agencies to put together a solid map. We wanted to give the idea. And so to reiterate what Robin said, so kind of ignore what's on this map, and the question would be, what are the key things we should include? We have Nordhoff as the evacuation, our potential evacuation or shelter site, the hospital, the Humane Society. We had the police department and the fire department buildings, just so people know where those are at. And then we were just kind of opening it up to, is there any other thoughts of things that would be critical to include in a map? So
I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just real quick, I think one way to maybe get your first layer is anything that's been mentioned on the previous pages as a location should be on here, and then take a look at it and go, all right, is that too busy? Is that going to work? And then that might just be a good starting point. Just a suggestion. Good idea.
How about addresses in case we have folks from out of town and they just don't know their way around? They could always punch in an address into a map app and get to a certain point that we have identified on this map.
Anything else? Jump to the next page. Okay, so this is our basic emergency kit, which we pretty much stole from you guys at county. So that's a good one. Just a note on preparation.
Microphone, please.
Thank you. Preparation. We just want to hit people again with the importance of preparation and have a list that they can put on the refrigerator, that they can copy, they can check the boxes. And this seems to be the basic list that I'm seeing on the FEMA sites and on the county site. But if there's anything missing or that's specific to Ojai, let's get it on here.
A thought, when you do get this thing finalized, it would be great to get it to the board of realtors and ask that every new person moving into Ojai gets a copy of this plan for the first time. It's like I say, we don't know when it's going to be. We don't know next Thursday. So if everybody gets one of these things coming into the city, they're probably going to glance at it. But when something happens, at least they'll have a resource to go find out what they really need to do.
Yes.
I really was going to resist this. I realize we're not in a meeting to create emergency supply kits, but I do think it's important for emergency supply kits, given what I know of others' experience in the Thomas Fire, to have photocopies of important insurance documents.
Documents.
You heard that, insurance documents. Okay.
And Robin could. I found out when I went down to Nordhoff to pick up some people. They were in their 80s and drive them down to Crown Plaza. They had animals, and They didn't have the vaccination cards, and a number of hotels wouldn't allow their pets in without the evacuation cards. And so you're going to go to a hotel, you're going to go somewhere for a week, you're going to be camping out in that temporary area because you're not going to get in a hotel. A lot of hotels will, but just a thought, why not have it with you?
And Robin, this might be an opportunity as well to mention readyventuracounty.org again, because we do have a lot of additional items to add to this list, and we provide specifics for different types of, family situations and animals. We have a nice checklist on there for large animals and small animals to prepare.
I think we had listed pet food and medicine, but I think I thought we had medicine on there, but I don't see that now. And then Hadi just reminded me about 24-hour medical equipment as well that people may have. So maybe, medicine and medical equipment.
Yeah, I think the key one on that one, if they have 24-hour medical equipment like a sleep apnea machine or O2 concentrator, to consider having an emergency generator for their home.
Okay, folks, we've made it to the end. Let's take a look at this back page. We have listed some of our key stakeholders. I think we may be missing some stakeholders. So take a look if there's anyone you feel like needs to be on this guide. I'd like to include some logos on here and give everybody credit who has worked with us on this. It's truly been a collective process.
I have a comment on this last page. Just for, like she was mentioning about, it's not the department, but the office. Ventura County Supervisor District 1, Matt Levere. It's not just a supervisor, it's a District 1 supervisor, just a little point.
Doesn't run the whole county.
And the other point is, would it be too busy to have basic phone number? So it's not just an acknowledgement page, but it's also a contact page.
Sure, that's a great idea.
For each of these, so if I need to get a hold of the hospital, what's the phone number?
We could perhaps do a contact link and then the number.
I'm just thinking it might be, we've got space here on the page.
Okay.
I know the Humane Society too, we listed.
I know, I'm renaming everybody here.
Let's do that. And then I think the two that I thought of this morning was Caltrans.
Yes.
Which we have in other places. We just missed them here. And then one would be CAL FIRE. And I wonder kind of, what would fire think about that? Is that one and the same with Ventura County Fire? Or is it worth bringing?
Yeah, so within Ventura County here specifically, we represent CAL FIRE. Okay, so we fall under that umbrella of representing CAL FIRE.
So by mentioning you, we capture CAL FIRE. Is that what you're saying?
I feel comfortable with that.
We could put Wayne's name in there, so when we smell smoke, we can call the radio station.
Yes,
they can tell us what's going on.
Now, Bob Daddy was one of the original people for the 1610 radio station back in the early days. I have the emails.
That's when the school wouldn't let you use their parking lot to broadcast your emergency signals.
There's a whole story. About a year ago, there was an emergency preparedness thing in Libby Park, and a lot of people were there. One of the attendees was Casitas Water, and they contacted us later about putting in an empty radio station down there, which didn't go all the way. We actually got them the equipment and everything, but they kind of lost interest in it. But I just wondered whether Casitas would be somebody on this list. They're in the valley. There's a dam that could break. There are just water considerations. Just they might be a player, like it or not, down the road. So just a thought.
Thank you.
We did have the boil water advisory, for example, during the Thomas fire that we kind of forget about, and so that might be, we should probably figure out a way to have their contact information in for if and when an emergency happens.
For sure. And I'll reach out to them and give them the opportunity to look at the guide.
and maybe all the utility companies. I mean, it may get too busy, but maybe look at that. I mean, Edison's got a stake in this for sure. And back to the, you know, like CPAP machines and whatnot, medical devices. Edison has a pretty detailed website that has disaster preparedness and charging stations. I think, you know, if it's a true document to help people get ready, I think Edison would be a good one. SoCal Gas. We talked about the water company. Am I missing anyone else? I guess that's it for like the main players. Because even if you evacuate to repopulate the area, all those players have to weigh in, right? So just a thought.
Can we all just give Robin and John and James a hand, because this is huge.
So much.
I think we made it.
I have like
20 pages now, right?
Okay.
We actually
You wanna hear
didn't do
next?
too bad.
Yeah.
Next step, super quick. So we're going to sit down, we're going to integrate this input that we got today. We have another event on the 24th. As you know, everybody should have a flyer for that event. In the meantime, if you leave here and you realize you forgot to say something, you look at the guide and see something you missed, please reach out directly to me. City Hall, I'm at extension 103. And thank you, everybody. And we'll hand it over to James for goodbye.
I think you hit it. I was going to just give everybody your email address to bug you. So, we'll send that out following this. But no, again, we do appreciate it. Like I said, we thought, oh, August will be nice and quiet. And then we realized we're infringing on people's plans. So we do appreciate everybody for coming out and being part of what we think is an important resource for the community. So thank you very much, everybody.
Can I add one more thing before we go? I just wanted to thank James Hahn and Weston, because it's not easy to take a little room like this and make it into something that works.
They did a great job.
They did a great job. So thank you guys.
Thank you, James.
Like the biggest kick I got was coming in. I go, oh my God, they're checking the facility.
Oh, I know. That's, no, and it was really well done too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know. We need to. Yeah. Thank you.